Hello, and welcome to the latest session of Spotlight on Security Tech Insights. My name is Shelly Calhoun-Jones, and I'm a principal technologist here at Cohesity. Today, we're joined by Jonathon Mayor, a solutions architect here. Jonathon, would you like to do an introduction?
Yeah, sure. I'm Jonathon Mayor. Been around Cohesity for a number of years now, and then prior to that, I worked in large enterprise and had a focus on digital forensics, and just like to tinker with anything and all things creative or security related.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, well, we're very happy to have you, Jonathon. And in this episode, we're going to talk about what a data clean room is and how it's used to respond and investigate a security event. Now, you can think of a clean room almost as a digital fortress of solitude. It's meant to be impenetrable and isolated. The idea is that we want to make sure we have a controlled and secure environment where our sensitive data is protected from external threats, ensuring that it remains uncompromised and secure. And recovering from attacks can sometimes leave companies open to new attacks. And so we're going to talk today about how you can use a trusted tool like a clean room to analyze and fix issues in a controlled setting. This way you can identify the source of attack and respond and recover quickly. So we know that our clean room is meant to be a digital fortress of solitude, Jonathon, but why do you think it's important to have one, and how do you make one for security investigations?
Yeah, I love the analogy. Who doesn't love a good Superman reference here and there? And just like Superman would fly up and get better perspective on life and just the goings on in his world. That's exactly what the clean room is all about, right? Like I said, I come from large enterprise, and I worked in companies where we had real clean rooms. So it is a place that you take something into it so that you can get a good look at what's going on without presenting any contaminants, right? So you're trying to get a really pristine view of what's going on so that you can find the problems. And so that's, from a digital perspective, what you're really focused on is using a clean room as a means to bring in suspicious workloads and systems and data so that you can get a good sense of where a threat may be, or where something that is of interest can be clearly identified, documented, because the real objective of it is to produce a report of what you find so that can then be, either in the case of a live incident response, that becomes part of the incident response, the incident report, and that helps for the mitigation efforts, and just standard operations, that becomes part of your threat intelligence library.
No, that's great. And I would imagine you'd probably need to do this process a couple of times depending on the severity of the issue. You may need to restore
it's iterative
workloads.
Exactly. I mean,
put your magnifying glass on.
Just like the workshop behind me, right? Like when you're going through things, you're gonna do a little bit, check it, see how it turned out, do it again, and you keep doing it until you get what you need.
No, that's great. And just kind of on the topic of clean rooms, I know a lot of folks use the concept of a jump bag when working with the clean room. I'm guessing that you've worked with jump bags before. How do you manage the maintenance of these tools, since you may get new versions of the tools that come out? You may have different tools that you may want to apply to a particular situation.
Carefully. You do it carefully. I mean, all kidding aside, I mean, a jump bag, that's not a new concept, right? That's been around for decades and decades, and it's a physical thing. In addition to tools and stuff like bright blockers, hard drives, pin drives, I mean, you put granola bars, you put earplugs, because data centers are loud. If you're working in older data centers that haven't started increasing temperatures, you probably throw in a jacket, right? So, I mean, it's the stuff you need. The whole point is that you think ahead of time, you put the stuff there so that when you run out the door, there's less chance of you missing something that's important.
Right.
So similar vein from a digital standpoint, when we're building out one of these clean rooms for an incident response, having the taking a little foresight and looking at what's in the physical jump bag, and then putting together a digital jump bag. Especially there's more and more ability, more and more ways to put digital assets into an immutable structure, and then even being able to then store those in an out of band location, so that if your enterprise is impacted, you still have access to all those things. But stuff like a copy of your incident response plan, contact list, contact protocols, user manuals, ISOs, installer media, config files, even maybe certificates and things that are particularly important. So, all of those different assets can be stored in that digital jump bag. And the whole idea is that when things go bad, you have a quicker ability to access those assets in a variety of locations. So it speeds up your response and just makes you more effective.
That's a really good point about making sure that you have the actual documentation for your processes and procedures. I know from a DR perspective, it can sometimes be challenging keeping that documentation up to date, but when something bad does happen, you want to make sure that you have the right contact info for folks and that you're treating it with the right level of severity. So really, really good points there.
And it is a thing that takes additional effort. And on top of that, just like when you go download a package from the internet, you want a hash to validate that it's maintained its integrity. Same thing when you're maintaining the digital jump bag. You put assets in there, you hash them, or otherwise validate that what's in there is what's supposed to be there. Like I said, I come from the forensics background, right? And so hashes, chain of custody, all of that, that's part of the overall process. So this is nothing new in terms of just using the same kind of protocols to maintain that digital jump bag.
That's a really good point that you bring up on file integrity, because I know a lot of times when you're dealing with an active threat, you want to make sure you have a list of the files that could be impacting these systems. You want to make sure that you have the right file hashes. So not only do you have it for your documentation, but you can also go out to sites like VirusTotal and see whether or not that threat has actually been active out in the wild. So that's a really good point that you bring up there.
Yeah, I mean, hashes, they can be used
For
good and bad, right? It's just a fingerprint. So whether it's me proving that I've got the thing that I meant to have, or whether it's me finding something that's nasty, they make the world go around, right?
Right. It could be a false positive. Who knows? Well, that's great. So have you ran into a scenario just on your personal experience where having a clean room has really played a critical role in the investigation?
I mean, absolutely. That's in a past life. It was we would run this. It was standard operating procedure, and we ran into these kind of situations on pretty much a weekly basis. And so we had a global environment, and we would very, very routinely get alerts that something was going on in a particular location. And so the very first thing we would do is start looking at things like network traces and whatever other telemetry we had to understand what's the scope and the impact, right? Depending on if people are calling in and saying something's going on, or if you're observing it through your monitoring tools or logs, whatever, you very quickly understand and identify kind of where you need to essentially drop the gates. And at that point, we would, if it was bad enough, I mean, we certainly had a number of situations where we would have to isolate an entire office location.
Oh, man.
Tell everybody to just take a break. I mean, you kill the network. And
yeah.
At that point, it's feet on the street and a lot of coordination. And it allows you to understand very quickly, okay, we're blocking everything off so that we've contained the threat. And then from there, we send somebody in to to say, okay, based on our intelligence, these are the systems that are interesting to us and where the attack seems to be originating from. And so then, capture, in some cases, we would actually need to gather a forensic copy off of that.
Yeah.
So that's there again, there's that jump bag, and maybe we had to power the system down and put a write blocker on it and pull the disk image, or maybe we needed to grab a memory snapshot first. But depending on the situation, we would gather everything we needed, take that back for analysis, understand exactly what we were dealing with, and then document what are the steps that we need to take to address any systems that have been impacted by this thing. And then we would push that back out to the operations teams, and then they would go take care of it, make sure that it was documented, that everything was taken care of and remediated accurately. And then from that point, we could start bringing things back online.
Wow. And that's really interesting. I used to work for a very popular security vendor, so I was kind of on the other side of the fence, working with folks like you to sometimes triage potential infected files to like our security response team. So it's interesting to get your perspective, just with my own personal experience with it. You're absolutely right. There's a lot of red tape that sometimes you have to go through, especially if you're working with mission critical systems that you have to triage. You want to make sure that you have something available, something online, so you can keep your business going. But at the same time, you want to make sure that the environment itself is secure. So really interesting getting your perspective there.
Yeah, and every situation is a little different. Fortunately, in our case, we never had a situation where the entire environment got taken down. Because in that case, then you've got an additional step of, I need to rebuild just my base response capability before I can even begin anything else. And so from that sort of initiating the response, how do I get my communication back up and running? How do I get my basic, dial tone services like authentication, name services, time, those kinds of things, even just my core security tooling. How do I get that back online? So, we certainly planned for the worst case scenario always. And so we would, that's again, part of the jump bag is having the install media and things for those. Like I said, anymore, there are newer things available to make reinstantiating those key systems simpler and faster, and helps with the overall response timeline.
So for folks that are new to the security realm or just want to learn more about clean rooms, what type of knowledge should personnel working with a clean room possess? Like, do you have any recommended like training resources or maybe newsletters that you like to subscribe to? I know I like the TLDR security newsletter.
Depending on where you are in your overall experience and career and knowledge and stuff, there are lots of great platforms out there these days, just to get a basic understanding of things. CISA, they're really big on just education and enablement of the general population. There are sites like TryHackMe that have a really broad range of different facets of security that you can dig into. Back in the day, there's Smash the Stack, and there are other kind of war games type environments. SANS, if you've got the budget, like those top training SANS.
Yes.
They're fantastic. In the early days, I participated in a number of the net wars, kind of when they were first kicking that whole thing off. So, kind of a capture the flag scenario. It was pretty fun. And frankly, honestly, read manual. I joke with my kids that, my primary job is reading manuals.
I feel you there.
Because so much of the clean room stuff is doing a lot of the normal operations things. It's just kind of practice doing it efficiently and seeing ways that you can both make it simpler and more repeatable, but also challenge yourself and say, okay, well, I can do this in a nice, cozy environment with everything. But if I took away like Active Directory, does my process still work? If I take away DNS, does my process still work? If I move it into a different IP range, does it still work?
Yeah.
If I disconnect internet, same question, right? And so that's the key, is to come up with what you think is a good plan and then stress test it, start breaking things. Because if you don't do that, then ultimately that's what you're going to be faced with during an attack.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of chaos engineering.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's really cool. Yeah, I think it really drives the point home. You can never be in cruise control with security. You always have to be constantly learning and seeing what others are doing out there, and just really staying connected with what's happening out in the community. So, no, this has been great. I've really enjoyed getting your perspective, John. You're always a pleasure to work with. But yeah, just from a clean room perspective, I think really the key takeaway is that, incident response teams that can use data clean rooms to, scrutinize, analyze, record digital evidence, and make sure that you're doing this within a contained environment, and really understand how it's used during a live security event, kind of going back to what you mentioned with taking out critical services and seeing what happens. You always have to plan for that worst case scenario. So it's great to know there's a lot of resources out in the community that folks can work with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to kind of reiterate that, I know I just said it, but like, make the plan, absolutely have a plan, and challenge it. And it's really about the biggest thing that I encounter just in my day-to-day travels these days, or anymore, is it really takes changing the mindset of an organization, where when you say, do we have a plan? Yes, we do. Are there any problems with it? Yes. We keep finding problems and we keep fixing the problems, and that's okay. Like, you want to have that mentality,
right?
Because if you're finding them, the adversaries are not. Because hopefully, if you find them and fix them, then your adversaries are not, and it helps you improve and get better, right? So that's the key, is don't be afraid to find problems, because that's where the strength comes.
No, that's great. And just for the audience, if you want to learn more about data clean rooms, we do have resources available at cohesity.com. We'll make a note to maybe put in some supplemental resources in this video. So that way, if you do want to check that out, you can see some of the available resources that are out there. With Cohesity, you have the ability to protect, respond, and recover from ransomware. It gives you the ability to identify threats, assess the impact, and recover your critical data. So, real excited to have John on today's episode. This actually wraps up today's episode of Cohesity Tech Insights. I just want to thank everyone for watching. Take care.
Thanks so much.